بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله، وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. So today is our 40th lesson, lesson number 40 on this book of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, Al-Uboodiyyah, which is servitude to Allah. And in the previous lesson we spoke about, the discussion was related to arrogance and how it is the opposite of Islam, and Islam is the deen, is the way of all of the messengers, and all of the prophets. This is what they call to. The name of their religion was Islam, and the name of true religion can only be Islam. We mentioned how if you look at every other deen, every other religion, whether it is Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism or Buddhism or whatever, it's always named after a person or a place, and it's tied to something, whereas Islam is a universal meaning. It means submission to Allah Azza wa Jal, in obedience to Him, and this is a description of the state or the way that the prophets and messengers call to, and it is something whose name is appropriate to what we can observe and see of the creation, all of it being in submission to Allah Azza wa Jal, whether out of choice or not out of choice. This is something we discussed earlier on, how there is uboodiyyah, there is universal servitude, where everything is obeying the laws of Allah Azza wa Jal, right, whether they like it or not, meaning the creational laws, and this is submission whether you like it or not, right? وَلَهُ أَسْلَمَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. To Allah has submitted whatever is in the heavens and the earth. So whether they are a disbeliever, a believer, a Jew, a Christian, a polytheist, a Muslim, it doesn't make any difference. All of them are in submission to Allah Azza wa Jal. And this we know just by observation. And so therefore the name of true religion can only ever be Islam, right? Meaning that you acknowledge and you willingly submit to Allah Azza wa Jal. So we mentioned that point, and we looked at many verses in the Quran, quoting from numerous prophets and messengers, from Ibrahim alayhi salam, from Hud, from Yusuf, from many others. In all those statements from the Quran, they use the word Islam or Muslim or submission. So this is the name of true religion. And at the end of the previous lesson, we had a discussion to do with the causes, the asbab, the causes, the ways and the means. And we mentioned how everything in Allah's creation is by way of the causes, the asbab, right? So water, for example, is a cause of life. And water is a cause of quenching thirst, right? And the sun is a cause of many different things, right? And so the whole of creation is just a very complex, intertwined, system of causes and effects that Allah Azza wa Jal has created. He has put them together. He has arranged them to work together for wisdoms and objectives, that he has. And so these causes, when we speak of these causes, then we take a correct approach we take a correct approach as it relates to the causes, right? So we do not negate the fact that there are causes in Allah's creation, right? So we don't negate the fact that Allah does things by way of His causes, right? So we believe, for example, that water is a source of life, and Allah made it as such. And we can ascribe that property to water, right? Because Allah put that property in water, right? There are some people who deny that there are any causes and effects, right? So some people say, for example, like the Ash'aris and people like that, who deviated on this topic, they say that if I drink a glass of water and my thirst is quenched, it wasn't that the water has a property that quenches my thirst. It's that Allah created the quenching of thirst to coincide with me drinking the water. Do you understand? Right? It's not the water that's causing it. Similarly, if I put my hand in the fire and my hand got burnt, it wasn't the fire that burnt my hand, but the burning was created separately by Allah Azza wa Jal there and then to coincide with the fire. Right? So this is a view held by some Muslim sects like the Ash'aris, and this is false. Right? It opposes reality. We can't deny causes and their effects. Otherwise we can't do science. We can't investigate the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? And we can't derive, we can't address our beneficial interests by investigating the creation of Allah and looking at causes and their effects and developing, knowledge in things like agriculture and industry and technology and things of that nature. We can't do that if we deny that there are causes and effects that Allah has created and tied together and put them in His creation. We can't do that, right? So we are not at that extreme of rejection. Nor are we on the other side. The other side now, we have people like the philosophers, the naturalist philosophers, or like the atheists and materialists of today. And they go to the other side and they basically say that everything happens because of the properties of things. Right? So for example, the thirst is quenched because of the property of the water. But that's not strictly true. That's not true. Because, as we mentioned, every cause which exists in creation also relies on other causes without which it cannot occur. Right? So, in example of the fire, right? The fire obviously needs oxygen, it needs fuel to burn, the fire needs other things as well, right? So this means that it's not that the actual property of the thing in and of itself is able to produce the effect. Rather, it is because Allah has put that property in that thing, and that property of that thing also requires other causes without which it can't happen. Right? Right? So on this side, there are some people like the atheists, materialists, who are basically, they are attributing all of the effects to the actual properties of things. And that's also not correct. Right? Whereas what we say as Muslims upon the sound middle path is that we say that Allah Azza wa Jal put causes and their effects in creation. He tied the two things together, right? And yes, there are properties of things. There are properties of chemicals. There are properties of substances like water, for example, or oil. There are properties of chemicals, like I said, like you can take a pill and it will remove your pain because the molecule has, particular properties. So we accept and affirm the properties in things, but we say that they only take their effect by the permission of Allah Azza wa Jal, because there are also other causes, there are other conditions that also have to be present, which Allah has also created for that thing to have its effect, right? So we are not on this extreme of negation of the causes, nor are we on the other extreme of, claiming that it is the properties of things in themselves that can create the effects, right? So for example, plants, for example, you have a seed, right? If I put the seed on the windowsill, is that seed going to turn into a plant? Of course it's not. The seed, although it has properties, those properties in themselves will not make it turn into a plant and then produce fruits, right? It needs water. But then a seed and a water is still not enough. It needs soil. And then a seed and water and soil is still not enough. It needs the sun, right? So here you can see that the sun has the property of being a life-giving force, but on its own it can't do that. And the same with the soil, same with the water, same with the seed, right? So who is the one who put all these things together? It is Allah Azza wa Jal, right? He put properties in things, of course, we accept that. But the properties in and of themselves are not in and of themselves the producers of the effects, if you know what I mean. Right? So this is something that we discussed at the end of the previous lesson, and it is something that is very, very important to understand, because it affects a lot of things. It affects a lot of things. And one of the things to which it can be applied to is the issue of contagion, or what is called infectious disease, according to the people of disbelief. And so we discussed this also, we illustrated that at the end of the previous lesson as well. So moving on from that then, so we are discussing, moving on from this, we are discussing the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal is the creator of all causes and their effects. And that there is nothing within creation that is free of need and free of dependence upon other than it. Right? Everything besides Allah Azza wa Jal is in need and is dependent and cannot subsist by itself. It needs other causes, it needs other things. And the only one who is free of all need and free of all want is Allah Azza wa Jal. And so this shows, that obviously He has the right to be worshipped, and nothing else has the right to be worshipped by way of this fact. And so since that is the case, then Allah Azza wa Jal is Al-Ghani. This is one of His names. He is free of all need. Right? And so this whole discussion is in the context of Islam being the true religion. So continuing from where we left off, then Shaykhul Islam, so today's lesson starts from this point. Shaykhul Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, وَهُوَ سُبْحَانَهُ وَحْدَهُ الْغَنِي عَنْ كُلِّ مَا سِوَاهُ لَيْسَ لَهُ شَرِيكٌ يُعَاوِنُهُ وَلَا ضِدٌّ يُنَاوِئُهُ وَيُعَارِضُهُ. So he says, He, meaning Allah, the sublime, He alone is Al-Ghani. He is the only one who is free of all need and from everything that is besides Him. And He has no partner, He's got no partner that aids Him, nor does He have any adversary, any opposite or adversary that contends with Him or that opposes with Him. No such thing exists for Him. He neither has a helper that aids Him in what He does, nor does He have any adversary that can contend and with Him. Qala Ta'ala, Allah the Most High, He said, that He mentions a verse as evidence. قُلْ أَفَرَأَيْتُمْ مَا تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِنْ أَرَادَنِيَ اللَّهُ بِضُرٍّ هَلْ هُنَّ كَاشِفَاتُ ضُرِّهِ أو أرادني برحمة هل هن ممسكات رحمته قل حسبي الله عليه يتوكل المتوكلون. So he mentioned a verse in the Quran, Surah Al-Zumar, Surah 39, verse 38. Say, do you see that which you call upon besides Allah? Look at the things you are invoking and you are calling upon as gods that you worship besides Allah. Tell me, if Allah wanted some harm for me, for some harm to come to me, would they be able to remove that harm? Or if He wanted some mercy for me, if He wanted to show mercy to me, would they be able to prevent His mercy from reaching me? Say, sufficient for me is Allah, upon Him should those who place their trust. Right. So the meaning of this verse here is that benefit and harm is completely in the control of Allah Azza wa Jal. And no one else can come and intervene and either prevent a harm or prevent a benefit or prevent any mercy. So there is no one to contend with Allah, to compete with Allah in His creation, nor is there anyone to actually help Him and aid Him in His creation. He's not in need of any helpers, right? So, and then also he mentions another verse, وَقَالَ تَعَالَى, the Exalted, He said, وَإِن يَمْسَسْكَ اللَّهُ بِضُرٍّ فَلَا كَاشِفَ لَهُ إِلَّا هُ فَإِن يَمْسَسْكَ بِخَيْرٍ فَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. So, if Allah withholds, if someone wants to, if Allah wants to afflict you with harm, then there is no one that can remove it. And if He wants to afflict you, وَإِن يَمْسَسْكَ بِخَيْرٍ فَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. If He wants to afflict you with goodness, then He has power over all things. So far then, this indicates that Allah Azza wa Jal is in complete control over the disposal of all of the affairs. There are no interveners, there are no contenders, there are no aiders, there are no helpers, right? He is Al-Ghani, He is free of all need. And as for everything else besides Him, then whether everything else besides Him needs other things besides themselves, right? Why? Because of the way Allah created His creation. It is an intertwined, complex set of causes and their effects, right? And everything needs something else. The animals need herbage, right? The herbage itself, it needs soil, water, rain, right? And so everything else, there's nothing that you can point to except that it needs something else, except for Allah Azza wa Jal. Then Ibn Taymiyyah moves on to Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he mentions numerous verses about Ibrahim alayhi salam and his argument with his people to illustrate the aspect of Tawheed and to illustrate this whole issue of the causes and their effects, and how everything and anything in the creation is a creature, is dependent, is needy, and can never ever be worthy of worship. And this is illustrated in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran, which Ibn Taymiyyah then, he goes on to allude to and to mention. So he says, وَقَالَ تَعَالَى عَنِ الْخَلِيلِ, Allah the Exalted said about Al-Khalil, Al-Khalil meaning the intimate friend. Ibrahim alayhi salam was the intimate friend of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so Allah said, قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ, quoting Ibrahim, what he said to his people, قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّمَّا تُشْرِكُونَ. O my people, I am free and innocent of that which you ascribe to Allah as partners, that which you associate with Allah as partners in worship. I am free from that. I am innocent of that. إني وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا. Indeed, I have directed my face, I have turned my face to He who originated the heavens and the earth. I have exclusively turned my face to Him, to He who originated the heavens and the earth. وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, and I am not of the polytheists. I am not of those who worship other things besides Him. Then it continues, وَحَاجَّهُ قَوْمُهُ, then his people debated with him. And he said, قَالَ أَتُحَاجُّونِي فِي اللَّهِ وَقَدْ هَدَانِ, are you trying to dispute with me, whereas Allah has guided me? وَلَا أَخَافُ مَا تُشْرِكُونَ بِهِ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ رَبِّي شَيْئًا, and I do not fear those things which you have ascribed to Him as partners. Meaning, I don't fear the things that you worship besides Allah. And then the verse continues, it's actually a number of verses, a series of verses, 4 or 5 verses. And up until he comes to the verse number 82, so this is chapter number 6, Surah Al-An'am, chapter number 6 in the Quran, verses 78 to 81. Verses 78 to 81. Right, so this passage continues up until Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يَلْبِسُوا إِيمَانَهُم بِظُلْمٍ أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْأَمْنُ وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. It is those who believe and do not confuse their belief with oppression. They are the ones who have safety or security, and they are the ones who are rightly guided. Right, so from here, obviously, the mention is made of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan. Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan, he comments upon this passage, and he explains to us something of the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran. So he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned the argument of Ibrahim al-Khalil alayhi salam against his people. And these people were those who used to worship the stars. And they used to worship the stars. Like historically speaking, we know that shirk appeared in 2 ways. The first of those ways was by exaggeration in the righteous people. When you exaggerate in righteous, pious people, and you start raising them above their station, and you enter into exaggeration, right? This then sets you on the path to eventually turning them into gods besides Allah and them being worshipped, right? Like you see with the Romans and the Greeks, and many nations fell into this. And the people of Nuh alayhi salam, they fell into worshipping the righteous after many generations. This is one of the ways that shirk, one of the types of shirk. And the other type is basically what is in the heavens, the stars, the planets, the sun, the moon, the celestial bodies, and just being awed by them and by their grandeur and by their, and then powers are attributed to them as if they influence things upon the earth and events upon the earth, right? And then people start believing that maybe they have spirits in them, and those spirits have a connection to this earth and have influence and so on and so forth. And then eventually, these stars are then taken as objects of worship, objects of veneration. Right, so this now brings us into astrology and all of those types of things. So the people of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the people of Abraham, they were worshippers of the stars, and they used to erect idols and things like that out of veneration of these stars and as focal points for these stars, and they used to worship them. So Ibrahim alayhi salam was sent to these people, and he called them to worship Allah alone, to worship only Allah, and to abandon the worship of the stars. And he debated them, This debate is mentioned in Surah Al-An'am, this chapter number 6 in the Quran. And he argued with them and showed them and proved to them the futility, the falsehood of their worship of other things besides Allah Azza wa Jal. And so Allah said in the Quran, in this chapter, in verse number 75, وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِيَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. Thus did we show to Abraham the dominion of the heavens and the earth, so that he may be of those who have certainty. And therefore here from this verse, Allah Azza wa Jal gave certain evidences and knowledge, knowledge and understanding and evidences and proofs by which he could argue against his people who were the polytheists. So then it continues, فَلَمَّا جَنَّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّيْلِ. So when the night came and enveloped him, right, so the night came, رَأَى كَوْكَبًا. He then saw a star. And قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي. So Abraham said, this is my Lord. And what he meant by this, because remember, he's speaking to his people now. He's speaking to his people. And he's saying to them, this is my Lord? Like as an argument, saying like, are you telling me? Is it your claim that this is my Lord? This star that's appeared? That's what he means. So then Allah says, فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قَالَ لَا أُحِبُّ الْآفِلِينَ. But then when the star, it kind of disappeared and faded away, as stars do, stars disappear and fade away, then Ibrahim Islam said, I do not love those which disappear. Right? Meaning that such a thing cannot be my Lord. Such a thing cannot be my Lord if it's created, it's subject to control and regulation, it comes and it goes by Allah's command, right? How then can this be my Lord? How can you say this is my Lord then? Right? This cannot be worthy of worship. How can it be? So he refuted them on the issue of the stars. Then Allah Azza wa Jal, he says, فَلَمَّا رَأَى الْقَمَرَ بَازِغًا. Then, because the stars you can see every night if it's not cloudy. But the moon you don't necessarily see every night, because for at least 2 days in a month you don't see the moon at all, right? So when the moon, فَلَمَّا رَأَى الْقَمَرَ بَازِغًا قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي. When he saw the moon come up, he then said, this is my Lord. Meaning what he meant by this is to say, are you telling me this is my Lord? This is my Lord according to you? فَلَمَّا أَفَلَ قَالَ, and then when it disappeared, he said, لَإِن لَّمْ يَهْدِنِي رَبِّي لَأَكُونَ مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الضَّالِّينَ. So then when the moon disappeared and went away, he said, if my Lord does not guide me, I shall be of the misguided people. So again, he's making the same argument and the same point. How can this moon, which is subject to laws, it is subjugated for a purpose, and because it travels, and it travels according to a law and a pattern which it never departs from, never deviates from, how can you tell me that this is my Lord and that I should worship this thing? Right? And so, I am in need of guidance from my Lord in this, So then after that, the verses continue, the passage continues, and then Allah Azza wa Jal, he says, فَلَمَّا رَأَى الشَّمْسَ بَازِغَةً قَالَ هَذَا رَبِّي هَذَا أَكْبَرُ. So he said, when he saw the sun appear, he said, هَذَا رَبِّي. Are you telling me this is my Lord? هذا أكبر, this is the biggest of them. And because the sun is bigger than the stars, and it is bigger than the moon, and this is the refutation, obviously, of the modern astronomers and people like that who claim that there are stars and there are things like that which are much bigger and much larger than the sun, and the sun. This is a complete fabrication and a complete lie. This is not true. This is from their fabrications and their lies, right? The sun is the biggest object in the sky, right? And all the other stars are much, much smaller. And as for the claim of the atheists and the materialists and the astronomers that the reason why those stars are bigger than the sun is because they are so far away, that's they're light years away, and that's why they are so small. But in reality they are absolutely millions of times bigger than the sun. This is actually false, and mathematically we know this is false, right? And this is because if you look at the sun, right, there's a right. They claim that the sun is 93 million miles away, right? And you know that there's a principle. It's a correct principle, which is every time you double the length of something away from you, it halves in size, right? So every time you double the distance from you and a thing, it appears half its size what it is. So if that bottle there, to me, it looks like roughly, it's roughly about an inch, right? If that bottle went twice the distance from where it is now, it would be basically like, it would be half an inch, right? Like this, basically. So on that basis, if you look at the sun in the sky and you look at how much angular, what's the angular width that it takes, it's roughly, I think it's half a degree in the sky or something like that, right? You can work out the angular distance. So if you then took the sun another 93 million miles back, the sun would become half what it is right now, right? It would become half what you see it right now. We would go half. Then if you took it, if you double that again, another 2 times 93, which would be 186 million miles further back, it would become half what it is then, right? Then you've got to keep going further back and back and back and back till you take it to, however many millions of light years they claim that the nearest star is to us, right? And if you kept doing that, you would not be able to, it would be physically impossible to see it. Because it wouldn't actually have any, you wouldn't even see a dot, you would see nothing. It wouldn't even be visible, according to the actual mathematics and the physics of reality. You couldn't see it, it's impossible. Upon the distances they are claiming, right? You would not be able to see anything. And this shows that the stars are not like what they are claiming. They're actually they are close. They are within the lowest heaven, and this is a refutation of these modern day astronomers and astrologers, and a lot of the things that they tell us are just simply make believe ramblings of their minds. They don't have any reality. It doesn't have any reality to it. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he said, when he saw the sun appear, he said, "This is my Lord, this the biggest one." And فَلَمَّا أَفَلَتْ قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّمَّا تُشْرِكُونَ. So when it disappeared, he then said, "O my people, I am free of that which you associate with Allah. I am free of everything. All of this, that you're worshipping the stars, which is futile, you're worshipping the moon, which is futile, you're worshipping the sun, which is futile. I am free from that which you do. Because none of these things are worthy of worship." So here we see that Ibrahim alayhi salam, his argument against these people is to show that all of these things, the stars, the moon and sun, they are themselves creatures of Allah Azza wa Jal. They are created by Allah. They are subservient. They follow strict laws of their motion. They never depart from those laws. They come and they go. They are visible and become invisible. how can such a thing be worthy of worship? Right? So I'm free of you, I'm free of what you worship, I'm free of your shirk, I have nothing to do with you. And this from Ibrahim alayhi salam, it also indicates that, and in fact this argument would apply to anything and everything, right? So if we were, for example, arguing with, someone in a village, in some, place, remote place, and he claimed that this so-called, idol or a tree or something is worthy of worship, then all you have to do is to bring a dog and make the dog urinate on the idol and say, well, how come your idol, it can be urinated upon by a dog? Is this worthy of worship? Or you could chop the tree down and say, well, is this worthy of worship? How come the tree couldn't save itself? How is it going to save you if you can't even save itself? Or if you set it on fire, how come the tree couldn't save itself and yet it's going to save you, right? So the illustration here of the argument of Ibrahim alayhi salam applies to all other things, like the rational arguments. So, but the point, there's something additional here as well, which is that not only is it sufficient to know the futility of worshipping other things besides Allah, you also have to free yourself from this shirk and from the people of that shirk. Right? Because this is truth and falsehood. It's truth and falsehood. And, it's not sufficient just to know that it's falsehood. You have to free yourself, because there is such a thing as truth and falsehood. Right? You have to free yourself from it. You can't just be something, it can't be something just, like neutral. Like, for example, you see someone murder somebody else unjustly and kill them. This is not just like something neutral. You say, oh yeah, you killed him, that's wrong. Rather, you've got to dislike, and you've got to know that it's injustice, and you've got to free yourself from it. Otherwise, there's no real thing as right and wrong anymore, right? So there has to be truth and falsehood, love and hate, loyalty and disloyalty. Otherwise, the truth will no longer remain distinct from falsehood over time, right? If we do not free ourselves from things which are false and futile and wrong and oppressive, right? Then over time, everything will just, become confused and mixed. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he freed himself from the religion of these polytheists, and we do not say, oh, that's okay, yeah, well, you're free to do what you're doing, and I'll do what I'm doing. That's fine. Okay, you're wrong, but you're free to do whatever. This is not, this is not the right way. Rather, we say, as Shaykh al-Fawzan says, دينكم باطل لأنه لم يبنى على حق ولا على براهين. Right? Your deen is false. It's futile. It's false because it is not built upon truth, nor is it founded upon evidences. We can say this, even though at the same time we can have behavior and dealings with them. And you understand? Like, for example, there's a Hindu, and you can say, look, your religion is false. I don't agree with, worshipping elephants and monkeys and this and whatever, or whatever it might be. It's false. It's false religion. But that doesn't stop you from, it would be permissible to trade with a Hindu. It's permissible to show good behavior to your Hindu neighbor. These things are actually permissible in terms of the worldly dealings. They are permissible. But it doesn't mean that we say, oh yeah, that's your deen, you can be upon your deen and I'll be upon my deen and whatever. And, rather it is your deen is batil. I don't accept your religion. It is false and futile. Right? But you can also have dealings which are permissible in the worldly sense. But we must declare ourselves free and innocent from that which is false. Right? Otherwise, things start becoming confused and mixed, and the truth starts to, become eroded, and eventually it is forgotten. after passing of many, many generations. So the point being that when he falsified their worship of these deities, in this case the sun, the moon, the stars, and likewise of idols that were erected, right? He said, "Inni wajjahtu wajhiya lilladhi fatara as-samawati wal ard hanifa wa ma ana min al-mushrikeen." He then emphasized this and said, "I have turned my face to the one who originated the heavens and the earth, exclusively to him. I am not of the mushrikeen. وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ." I am not of the polytheists, right? So I have devoted my worship sincerely and purely only for the Creator, and who controls and regulates all of these, everything in creation. So then what happened is that his people began to threaten him and try to make him scared, right? They threatened him with harm and damage and death and the likes. So he said to them, وَكَيْفَ أَخَافُ مَا أَشْرَكْتُمْ وَلَا تَخَافُونَ أَنَّكُمْ أَشْرَكْتُمْ بِاللَّهِ. He said to them, how can I be fearful of the things that you worship alongside Allah? How do you expect me to be scared of your gods and the things that you're worshipping when you yourselves are not scared of the fact that you are committing shirk with Allah? Right. So in other words, why should I be scared of your gods with whom you are threatening me when you yourselves are not even scared of the fact that you are committing shirk with Allah? How does that even make sense? If I'm a worshipper of Allah Azza wa Jal, and I worship Him alone, and I fear nothing else besides Him, how silly is it for you to threaten me with your gods? To threaten me with your gods. How do you expect me to be fearful of your gods when you yourselves are not fearful of the fact that you're committing shirk with Allah Azza wa Jal? This is nonsensical. It doesn't even make sense. And so, how are you threatening me with your gods when you are not even fearing Allah Himself? You don't fear Allah in committing shirk with Him. How then are you expecting me? Why should I fear the gods that your gods? You don't fear the true deity. How do you expect me to fear false deities, basically? Right. So, and then he says, فَأَيُّ الْفَرِيقَيْنِ أَحَقُّ بِالْأَمَنِ. Which of the two parties is more deserving of feeling safe and secure? So which of us two, ought to feel more safe and secure? Is it me, who worships Allah alone? Or is it you who are worshipping idols? How can you even feel safe and secure worshipping idols? If the idol was to be set alight, it would burn. If the idol was to be humiliated, urinated upon by a dog that came next to it, right? Which of the two parties is more worthy of feeling safe and secure? You who take refuge in these false deities, or me who takes refuge in the Lord and Creator of the heavens and the earth, right? So this shows that the believer does not fear the polytheists and nor their deities. What reason has he got to fear the polytheists and their deities when they themselves, are worshipping that which is futile, right? So this is the argument of Ibrahim alayhi salam, of Abraham, and so as Shaykh al-Fawzan says, so here we see that Allah, He separated between the two parties, right? He judged between the two parties. He gave Ibrahim alayhi salam the truth, the evidences, the arguments, and He established the proof against them. And then after mentioning this, Allah Azza wa Jal, we come to the verse number 82 in chapter 6, Surah Al-An'am. He said, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يَلْبِسُوا إِيمَانَهُمْ بِظُلْمٍ أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْأَمْنُ وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. He said, it is those who believe and do not mix their belief with oppression. Right? What does it mean? Those who believe in Iman and Tawheed and do not mix shirk. Do not mix shirk into their belief. they are the ones who have safety and security. They are the ones who are safe and secure. And they are the ones who are rightly guided. So this verse comes immediately after Ibrahim alayhi salam said to them, to those polytheists, how can I fear your deities, which you worship, when you don't even fear the fact that you're committing shirk with Allah Azza wa Jal? Right? So here after that Allah says, it is those who believe and mix not their belief with oppression, meaning with shirk. They are the ones who have safety and security, and they are the ones who are rightly guided. This shows that true security and true safety, true feelings of safety, they are with the people of Tawheed. They are with the Muwahhideen. And as for the Mushrikun, they do not have any true and real, security. They do not have any true aman, any true security in their hearts, neither in the life of this world nor in the hereafter. And that's why, as we mentioned in previous lessons, you will see that the most resilient of people and the most patient of people in hardships, calamities, trials, difficulties, illness, death, and so on and so forth, it is the people of Islam, right? And those who are the most despairing and full of grief and likely to commit suicide and things like that, you find that it's the atheists, atheists and the materialists, because they have nothing to live for. And then likewise, from the people who commit shirk, right? Those who commit shirk, from the worshippers of idols and of animals and of the natural phenomena, right? So this we'll stop at this point, inshallah ta'ala. We need to break now for Maghrib, inshallah. So we'll stop the lesson at this point. We'll continue this discussion. We'll still discussing the issue of Ibrahim alayhi salam. We'll continue that in the next lesson. So for now, we'll end the lesson here, inshallah, and continue next week. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.